Hello and welcome to the Love Vibe podcast, hosted by Angela and Key, two women from the African diaspora creating space to explore and celebrate the sometimes unheard voices, stories and storytellers that speak to triumph and healing in the face of adversity and trauma. We will look at our connections to ourselves, to others, the environment, ancestry and the stars, yes, astrology. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. We welcome you to join us. Now, let's start the show.
Hey, and welcome to the Love Vibe. Today we have Ana Jimena Torres Ramirez, who was actually on our podcast in another series where she talked about her story and who she is. And as part of that story, Ana has explored with us a little about actually what she does as a clinical psychologist. And Ana works in the field of eating disorders. And this episode, we are lucky enough to have Ana here on the show, who's going to talk about the work, not only the work that she does, but the benefit for our listeners about being able to look at our bodies in context and in the context of the work that she does to assist people to transform the ways in which they accept their bodies and understand themselves. And we welcome you, Ana, again. Welcome.
Thank you for having me again. It's so wonderful. Last episode was amazing, and I'm looking forward to doing a bit of a deep dive for the community of the Love Vibe.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And thank you so much. And obviously, we've spoken a little bit in the last podcast about the work that you do around, you know, body compassion, body acceptance, body love. And there is this movement at the moment around really trying to dissect like our feelings and our relationships with our bodies. And yeah, we just really want to dive deep to kind of explore, you know, the things that you use, you know, your knowledge base, the values that come from it, so that our listeners can go away with some tips, but also some, you know, come away with some of the knowledge that you have.
Yeah,
you know,
some insights. Yeah,
as
definitely.
a specialist in this field, because we all eat and we all have bodies.
I know, right? Who would have thunk it? So thank you so much. I do want to put in a disclaimer and a little bit of a warning for those of people who experienced or have a lived experience of an eating disorder. Some of the things that we may talk might be a bit triggering or might be a bit uncomfortable. And so, you know, just giving you a heads up that we are still in the practice of doing this, and I'm not perfect. And so some of the language that I may use may or not resonate with the community.
Thank you for that, Ana.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm, you know, again, you know, what we talk about here doesn't replace, you know, your own health advice and your own experience. And I hope that you can use my intention is that the community can take this information and add it to their kind of wisdom, and then use that wisdom, you know, use that information with kindness and compassion.
Well, I'm going to be taking notes, just so you know.
Okay, cool, good. And my last sort of disclaimer is that I also want to say to the community that I am, you know, I'm speaking from a position where I'm in a small body, and I have a lot of white and financial privilege. And it's important that when we have these conversations, we acknowledge our positions of privilege, because it is not everyone's, you know, that will shape some of the way the information is spoken and told about. And so, you know, anybody who wants to provide any feedback or any comments, please, you know, I know in the show notes, there'll be information about where you can contact me, and I'm happy to open and continue to have these discussions with everybody. So yeah, so
amazing.
Let's dive in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's dive in. So, you know,
what do I
always,
do?
Yeah, we want to start right
give us a
at the
rundown.
beginning.
Yeah.
What do you do?
So the simplified version is I am a clinical psychologist who helps people with eating disorders, disordered eating, and body image concerns. That's sort of the title.
Mm.
Yeah.
What that actually looks like is helping people develop a relationship with their body that is rooted in compassion and acceptance.
Mm.
And in a world where we are bombarded and normalized to have a disordered and distorted relationship with our body, this is the greatest act of revolution that we can do to love ourselves.
Yeah.
Because from very young age, across ethnicities, across cultures, we are told that our body is something that is wrong, that our body is something that we should be ashamed of, and that we should never gain weight, and we should never enjoy food.
And we should always be trying to lose weight as well.
And we should always be trying to lose weight. And you know what? That's not how bodies work. And people don't know that. And so me and my team and the place I work with is called Mind Body Well. Our ethos is to help people liberate themselves from these oppressive systems that tell us that our bodies are unwelcomed here, because they are.
There is an element of like the whole industry feels as if it's like your body is just defunct, or there's a deficit, or you're always working in deficit, you know. Even the wording sometimes of what you see in the media, whether it's to do with that fat shake or going to the gym, or, you know, there is this kind of like your body is just not enough in the way that it is, and it's always going to be in a deficit position.
And
there's a whole industry around it.
And a very lucrative, several lucrative industries. I think the diet and wellness industry, on one of the last kind of informations that I read, is a $64 billion industry. And it creates a lot of harm. Because when we think about even some of the language we use about how we relate to the way we eat, to what our bodies look like, that we, you know, I think about when you look at yourself in the mirror, you know, how much of your voice is kind, how much of your voice is caring. And the thing that always floors me is how much of what you're saying to yourself would you actually say out loud to another person? And we would never say to our friends that certain body types look better or look worse, or that they need to slim down or tone up, or we wouldn't say that to our loved ones. We don't. And yet, this is the language of negative self-talk that we constantly share with ourselves. This is our monologue, this self-hatred. And when we look at books like My Body, or The Body Is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor, you know, if the norm is self-loathing and self-hatred and body hatred, then to the revolution is with self-love. And that's hard. From those two places, it's hard. It's hard work.
And Sonia talks also about you know, in very no uncertain terms about, you know, her point of view about the body being used as a site for terrorism. And she talks about body terrorism, which is really a confronting word to use. But when you dig down deep and you think of, you know, from childhood to adolescence to being a, you know, a young adult to now, actually, that's what it is. That's what it actually feels like. There's a terrorist attack against your own self, you know. And whether it's Yeah, and whether it's the thoughts, that critical voice, and we don't just do it to ourselves, we can also do it to others as well, because that's the program.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think about, just everyday things, movie theater seats, if your body is, large, and we know by weight science that weight and shape are determined more by genetics and social economic factors than by individual behavior. I'm going to say that again. We know that weight and shape and size are more determined by genetics and social environmental factors than they are by individual behavior.
Wow.
So I don't actually have a lot of control over what my body looks like, no matter what I do to it. It's sort of, think of it as like a heater, like central heating, and you set it at a temperature, a range of a temperature. Well, if you start opening up windows, it's going to change, right? Like it's going to get cooler or hotter. But the program is going to fight to stay within that range. Our weight's a little bit like that. It's been programmed from early on, and it, windows open and close and doors open and close, and sometimes there's like raging fires inside. And your channels, your systems are going to try to keep you in that kind of range. Now, we don't know what the range is, and there are people who, some people who are genetically and naturally skinny and smaller, then there has to be people who are genetically in larger bodies.
Yeah.
And they don't have as much access to stuff. Buying clothes for people in larger bodies is hard. Sitting in the movie theater may not always be as comfortable. Bathroom stalls, public transport. There's lots of things that continuously tell people in larger bodies that they are not welcome into these spaces.
Yeah.
And that is terrorism. That is oppression. That's segregation. That's discrimination. And what's worse is that because these messages are so persistent, then they're internalized. And the individual starts to believe that they are not welcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is this?
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot to take in, I feel like.
So everybody just take a deep breath and hand on heart and kind of sit there and go, wow, I have never thought about it this way. And this happens with many positions of, I guess, when we're, and I say this, when we're without knowledge, when we're in ignorance. I can't experience what it's like for a person of color to be in a space where they don't feel welcome because of their color. I don't know what it's like for a person of a religious faith to be unwelcomed into a space. This is the same thing. We're beginning to believe in the field that size is probably one of the last places you can legally discriminate against. And make horrendous claims around their character and their lifestyles based on something that is totally not even relevant, which is weight, because weight is not a determinant of health. It's not. It's just a number. It's just a gravitational pull.
So Anna, in the work that you do, have you come to any kind of points where you think what's the reason for this narrative? What's the reason for it? What's the reason that you want to tell people that their bodies are not accepted and and for people to not have access to certain things because of a certain body shape? What's the purpose of it all? Like, why?
The short answer: money, baby. So this idea of some body shapes and sizes being more acceptable than others dates back to the beginning of time. dates back, we have examples of people on restrictive dieting or on, consuming large amounts of food to produce rotund shapes, all the way down from, Egyptians' time to, this morning.
Yeah.
And when we look at history, and again, I've only had the opportunity to look at history through a European and Western view. So, it is limited, and history is not my forte. So, apologies to the community for me telling these stories quite inaccurately. But the gist of it is that there, with slave trade increasing, with religious pursuits and morality becoming much more into the foreground, there was a need of a way of controlling the population, and fearing a fat Black body was the most financially viable way of doing it. Because it then started to create a distinction between those who were desirables and those who were not. And there's even examples within Irish immigrants in the US, where and German immigrants in the US, because of their quote unquote larger and stockier shapes, they were seen to be lesser and second class, even within the white diaspora. And so we start seeing that insurance companies, food products, they all start playing their hand in wanting these different shapes and sizes to be more privileged or predominant. Another big change was the Industrial Revolution. So, before that, clothes were tailored to your body shape and size. But then with the standardization of clothing, and clothing moving away from, being something that was private or something that was done in the home, or, very reserved, it started to be expanded and much more commercialized. And so, again, it's easier to make clothes in one or two sizes. And so
it's just convenient for somebody.
It was just convenient for somebody.
Yeah.
And then somewhere along the line, and I can't remember exactly where, but the whole notion of health got involved. And that really, can I swear on this?
Yeah.
That really fucked up this system, because we started to attach health and the pursuit of health to something that's not in our control. And so people are like, well, if you're in a larger size, then you must be unhealthy. No, that's not true. I can be unhealthy at any size.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I should be able to have the privilege to pursue my health at any size. And that's what health at every size means. It's not that you're healthy at any size. It is that you have the right to pursue your health independent of your shape, size, or weight. And that the information that is provided to you should be based on the best evidence for that condition, not on my shape and size.
Right.
And that is hard, because we believe intrinsically, because of the media, because of the communities we live in, that I must be unhealthy if I gain weight. I must be healthy if I lose weight. And that is not true. Actually, when we look at our biology, our body likes to gain weight. It's safer at higher weights. It feels more comfortable at the higher weights. It's when it begins to lose weight that there's danger. It's an indication of sickness. It's an indication where things might not be working as optimally. And we need
so
to
are you saying that's how the body might view what we're doing to it? Are
you
serious?
Yeah, so the body, so let's say you skip a few meals, right? Because it's recommended, like it's okay, like they did it. Like I'm gonna, what's it, fasting?
Intermittent fasting,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your brain cannot, and your body cannot distinguish between you doing something silly and a famine.
Of course.
Gotcha.
Why
And
would it?
Yeah.
your body has wisdom and memory of famine, of deep trauma. We are survivors of 64 billion years of evolution.
Yeah.
Our body knows shit.
Yeah.
And we're like, I'm just going to skip by like my breakfast or something.
That's,
And your
that's
body,
essentially me, Anna.
yeah. And your brain and your body are like, are we going into that famine? Do you remember that famine 1,000 years ago? Do you remember that? That was hard. Yeah. Okay. Well,
let's grab all this food and just hold on to it.
yeah. Well, fuck. I mean, maybe this is the beginning of it. And that hits after 4 hours of not eating. Your body starts to panic in 4 hours of not eating.
Okay.
Unless you're asleep. So when you're asleep, there's a different mechanism that happens, and your metabolism does something different. But when you're awake and you're up and you're running and you don't eat, your body thinks you're starving, and it's going to protect you at all costs. And that all costs is it's going to create preoccupation with food, right? Like you start like, oh, I really, really want that. I really want that food. I really want this, and you start like thinking about food and looking for food. And there's lots of cues that we don't realize that are hunger related, like the agitation where we're going and we need to go find food because I'm restless.
Yeah, right. So
and that's like, well,
go ahead. Sorry, please finish.
And then what happens is that when you have access to food, your body is like, I don't know. I am so unsafe. I'm so stressed. I am so terrorized by what just happened that I am going to ensure that this doesn't happen again. And that if it does, I'm going to be safe. And so that's when we feel that we have eaten large amounts. That is when we feel we've lost control over our eating. And that's what we think the problem is. But the problem is skipping breakfast.
Right. Okay.
I feel really emotional with all that you've just said. I feel so emotional when you talk about the body's need for safety and what it does. It doesn't understand that you're intermittent fasting because you watched a documentary, or it came up on your Instagram feed, or the person that you follow on Facebook or YouTube is now on this has done a collaboration or an affiliated kind of thing with a company or whatever. And all your body is saying is, please make me feel safe. I feel so emotional about that we're not, the messaging is so interrupting our human nature and our bodies into instability, and your body's actually feeling unsafe. I feel really emotional that this is what we're being asked to do.
This is what we're being asked to do. And then we're blaming ourselves. I mean, check this out. For our body to protect us. You failed that diet. Did you know that diets have a 99.9% fail rate? If it were a car, it would be recalled. They would not let us drive the diet car because it would kill us.
Yeah. Wow.
And if you look at the marketing model of a diet, it needs you to fail so that you buy more of its products.
Yeah, the
so that you
keep on
doing.
Yeah.
And so then we're creating and reinforcing a system of shame in where we starve ourselves. We threaten our body, as you were saying, that we terrorize our body. We make it feel unsafe. We take away its safety networks. We then shame it. Like it's an abusive relationship we're going through here.
Yeah, definitely. So I just have a question in terms of like for the people who may be like myself, in which I don't like intentionally skip breakfast. I'm just not hungry when I wake up. And then I also find that because I'm an air sign, like I can really get into whatever project I'm doing, whatever I'm working on. And I'll look up and it's like 6 hours and I've forgotten to eat, but I'm not screaming hungry. I'm not, you know what I mean? So how do you Like what would be your advice for someone that's sort of in that sort of space?
Yeah. So I'm going to preface this with each body has different needs,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't universalize any advice.
Yeah.
We also don't know, and I say this with great deal of respect, I don't know your story.
Yeah.
I don't know your history enough. I don't know if that's you actually listening to your body cues and being respectful and to your body cues, or is that just a habitual pattern that you've engaged in that you were not aware of, that was that started because too busy, not hungry, or feelings of fatness, or beliefs around eating breakfast. It's too hard to just kind of blanket it.
Yeah, gotcha.
I am going to say, and I'm going to do a blanket, I'm going to go BS, right?
Okay.
So I say this respectfully because most of the time we are socialized to not eat upon wake. We don't break the fast of evening, and we've been socialized that that's okay. I'll wait until I'm hungry to eat. But we also don't really have a good check on what our hunger cues are. And so it's so distorted. So it's like watching a movie in a foreign language and the subtitles are wrong.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
And so, have you ever sat through a movie where you're like, wow, those subtitles are really poorly translated, but we just don't know they're poorly translated.
Yeah.
Because we don't know the language of the body.
Yeah.
How to try, and this is, I work a lot with curiosity and experimentation.
Okay.
And experimentation is, well, what happens if you did start having some breakfast in the mornings? What are some of the things you noticed about how you operate or how you feel? And give it a good 6 months, right?
Oh,
one of the most common things. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, because we've been in this body for a while and we've done really awful things to it. So
yeah.
The first thing you're going to notice is that your hunger cues increase. And so you're actually more hungry. And that's not because you're hungrier. It's because you're finally you're turning up the volume.
Yeah. Yeah.
So your body's been hungry this whole time. And now it's like, thank God, can I get some more down here?
Yeah.
And then we realize that, hey, yeah, this breakfast thing, that it works. So actually I feel different in my body and different in a way that I want to feel.
Okay.
And there are times, and again, there's a lot of conversation about intuitive eating and like listening to your body. That's fine if your movie, your subtitles, and your understanding are all working fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But with all the amount of work that I do, and I've done within myself, I don't quite, like, we've got like some communication problems, body and I, in terms of like our hunger and like thirst cues and stuff. And so I have to be really curious and compassionate. There are days that I'm going to have hungry days and I need to be able to provide the sustenance for that. And there are days when I have less hungry days and I need to be able to be okay with that. Neither are good or bad. It's just different.
Just it is what it is. Yeah. That's interesting. So in hearing you sort of answer my question, what instantly came up for me was, you just got to figure out what you want to eat. Because I do struggle with, like, I'll have something to eat and I'll think, like, I'll give you an example. I did set a goal to have breakfast every morning for like a week. And I said, okay, this is what I'm going to have. I'm going to do my toast with avocado and a soft boiled egg. And that's going to be my breakfast. Salt and pepper on top. Be great. Had it the first day and was like, don't really want this. And so I struggle to sort of find the food that I want to eat. And I have issues like eating the same thing. Or like my husband will eat a bowl of, he has bran with almonds and oat milk every morning. How the fuck do you do that? How do you not get sick of that? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's bizarre to me. But I guess my other question would be like, sort of, and I know obviously this advice is given in a very general sort of way, but what are some of the bodily cues that people are missing in terms of, being hungry?
Yeah, cool. So my first invitation is, what if you didn't call it breakfast?
That's because I can have Vietnamese, like I can have pho for breakfast. Like,
why not?
And be very happy for the
Why
day.
not?
My breakfast is very savory.
Is
Why
it?
not?
I'll have greens. Like I'll do like stir-fried broccoli with loads of greens and some Carolina Reaper peppers in there. And
I'm coming over.
Where are you getting those from?
Oh,
me and him.
Coles, and I make it every single morning. And I'm like, Yuki, I need variation. But that's one meal of the day where if I know that I get excited at the thought of having greens in the morning. So my breakfasts are very savory. I can have rice in the morning. I can have I can have jollof rice in the morning, even though I'm keto at the moment. But anyway, we won't even go there.
Well, I mean, again, and that's the whole problem. If the way you engage with food has a name, that's a problem.
Okay.
Because it should be eating. I'm just eating.
Okay.
I'm just eating.
Okay.
I'm just eating.
I'm just eating.
I love that.
Yeah.
Just eating.
I feel like that takes the pressure away as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, inviting, because when we call foods or meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner or snack, we fall into a trap of limiting what that can be and what I have access to. Right? Breakfast food, lunch foods, dinner foods.
Right.
And it's like, well, choosing what I want to eat is a beautiful dance. So first, I need to kind of understand that what's available to me. What's in my fridge? What can I afford? Because sometimes I'm craving like a lobster and it ain't in my fridge.
Right.
And I don't know how to make one, and I'm not right. So what's in my availability to have? And so that's one part of the challenge. There's a lot of people who don't have that availability, that access to food. And so, acknowledging what I want to eat or can eat is part of the challenge.
Yeah.
And then, how do I know that what I want to eat is quote unquote the right thing if I've had this distorted relationship with my body and my eating patterns for decades?
Yeah.
So I don't know, I just don't know. So it becomes really stressful experience. Hunger comes in so many different ways. The last point of call for hunger is the grumbling tummy.
That's not last point.
That's not when hunger starts.
I had severe pain in my stomach a few days ago. And to the point where I was doubled over, and I was like, what is going on? What's the problem?
Eat, woman.
I was fucking hungry, right? I had no, I thought I'm just cramping. Is it coming early this month? You know what I mean? Completely no. And I ate something and I was like, oh, I feel a lot better. Oh shit. That's literally hunger pain. I've never experienced hunger pain before. It was, yeah. Sorry. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. So thank you. That is it. That's an experience. After that, so hunger grumbling is the last kind of cue that your tummy gives you, or your body gives you. And then it goes into pain and then it shuts down.
Ooh, I was close.
And then we suppress. And we're very good in the Western world of suppressing our communication with our body. Some of the first cues of hunger is thinking about food. Feeling a little bit distracted, feeling a little bit dry in the mouth.
Yeah, having a donut dance through your head. Is that?
Yeah. And then you start thinking you start noticing your smell becomes more acute to the smells of food, and you start being like, oh, that smells really good.
Yeah,
that's a hunger cue. That's your body saying, hey, I'm getting ready for my food. Give me some food.
Oh,
Wow. Okay.
our bodies are constantly trying to communicate with us, and we're running away.
And we run away all the time. And we think we know better. My little pea brain that's only been around for about, 41 years, thinks it knows more than 64 billion years of evolution. Like, really? Really?
When you put it that way, when you put it in perspective like that, yeah, okay.
Who am I?
Okay.
Who am I to go up against my ancestors and tell them that I'm not hungry?
Mm-hmm.
We are challenged because we fear that if we respond to hunger, we're going to gain weight. And we might.
Yeah. Because that might be what our body needs.
What your body's
and that's where my body and so when we talk about the journey to radical self-love, one of the pit stops or one of the towns we need to visit is body trust. I need to start to learn how to respect my body cues and then to trust them. And those are hard. Those are, that takes a lot of compassion and a lot of curiosity. It takes a lot of introspection. It takes a lot of defying cultural and community norms. It's about really withdrawing from the template of what you've always done and really explore what that means. And see what happens. Yeah. And again, all of this takes time. You can't do it for a day or two. You have to unlearn decades of body terrorism.
So can you tell me, in your work, what are some of the tools that you use with the people that, find you? What are some of the things that you would, obviously, you can't have a blanket and people are coming with lots and lots of different things, but are there certain tools? I know that you're trained in lots of different ways to kind of assist people with acceptance and self-love and
so I make everybody walk through an all-you-can-eat buffet. No, I'm joking. So there are a few things that have to happen, and this is what I encourage people in the community when you're with your therapist or if you're looking for a therapist, is that there is an experience of safety in the room. So the first point of the work is to be, as a therapist, is to be informed of a person's history, a person's trauma. We all have traumas, some capital T traumas, some little t traumas. And they'll show up in the room in different ways. And we all have a certain degree of trauma in the body and with our relationship with food and our bodies and our experience of our bodies. We, as therapists in this field, it's important that we listen and we're inclusive of that entire narrative, and help the person become inclusive of their own narrative and understanding of that. So awareness is, you kind of have to do like this balance between creating a place of safety, creating a sense of compassion, and also creating a sense of awareness, right? And it has to move at the right amount, because if you create too much awareness but no compassion, then you're just reinforcing negative self-messaging. If you have a lot of self-compassion but no awareness, then you're not really doing the work. You're sort of kind of putting rose-colored glasses on and staring into beautiful pictures, and that's not the work either, right? And to do that with somebody, so the work is, it's hard. It's hard no matter what you do, but if you do it with a person that you feel that is safe, because essentially there's not a lot of safety within, then if you know that the other person that's helping you guide this has safety. And so there's lots of moving pieces now that I kind of try to unpack it. And we go with curiosity. So one of the things that one of my favorite things to challenge people is to regular eat. And it's like, okay, for the next couple of weeks, I just want you to have 3 meals and 2 snacks a day and see what that's like. And I've got people going like, actually, I've never met a person who's like, that was easy. No, everybody found it hard on some level to be able to be like, yep, and to write it down and show me. And so when we monitor our food, I think that's really confronting. And but that's where we can see, like, that's where the conversations can happen. It's not monitoring the food to tell you then you're bad because you ate. It's, you know, it's about, okay, well, we're trying to be scientific and we're trying to collect data. The other thing I like doing is, you know, changing that internal narrative of, you know, how do I speak to myself? And so I mentioned earlier, you know, when we look in the mirror, what do we say to ourselves? What do we say about our bodies? And my rule of thumb is, if it's not neutral and nice, and if you wouldn't say it to somebody else, then don't say it. That's it. I have a zero bullying policy. My patients are not to be treated aggressively. My patients are not to be treated with violence. And those are words of violence.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So that's some of the work I do. I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist. I've trained in cognitive therapies because essentially, you know, it gets a bit of a bad rap in the field because people, I believe, haven't actually read the big books. I think they stayed with the like ebooks and they didn't go into like the heart and soul of it. So cognitive behavioral therapies are about changing a person's philosophy of life. It's about changing the way you think about the world, and to engage in ways that are self-accepting and other-accepting, that move and lead you into fulfillment and meaning, whatever that is. You get to choose that. And so I use so mindfulness is one that, because of my own practice, as I mentioned in the episode before, having been able to find mindfulness and having a strong meditation practice of my own and being able to bridge that with cognitive behavioral therapy and integrating that really works well. A more formal name for that is acceptance and commitment therapy, or mindfulness integrated CBT. And those are protocols, essentially. Those are manualized ways of doing, you know, the framework that I believe in.
So when you say protocols, what does that mean? Like does it mean a procedure?
Yeah. So there's a system, there's a procedure, there's a method behind the madness that's been evaluated. There are techniques or strategies that have been used. And I've been trained in those techniques and strategies, and I can take with the client. And again, you'll hear me use client and patient interchangeably. It's a product of working in hospitals for so long. And we take the person's story, or what I would use, you know, formulation or conceptualization, and with the client, this is revolutionary. With the client, we talk about where we want to like create interventions and what part of the problems do we want to work on, and so that the person's empowered, because you can't have embodiment without empowerment. And we decide what strategies to use, and we review and evaluate, and it gets a bit boring then, but, you know, it gets a bit technical.
I find it very interesting because I think it's you know, a lot of us in this society, if we go back to sort of the book that we referenced, which was what's the name of the book?
Body's Not an Apology.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of us are almost disconnected from our bodies, right? Like there's just this demarcation line where it's like we don't go there. We don't even, you know, address it or sit within it and stuff. And it's something that I've even noticed within myself. And so for the past few months, like it's been a practice of mine to, when I'm in meditation, I find that it's all here. Meditation for me is all in my mind. And I was in meditation the other day, and I think I told Angela about this, that my mind was just like firing off all these questions. And I was like, damn, you got a lot of questions. That's all, but literally that's all you have. And so then I started to realize, like, or this is my takeaway anyway from that session, was our minds are essentially computers, very good at analyzing, very good at details, very good at going over things, not very good at making decisions. Because when I make a decision, when I think that I've made a decision, I can still go through with it, you know what I mean? Just because I'm wired a little bit differently from people. Everybody's wired differently, but my mind is still in the back of my mind, like, well, did you think about this? Did you think about that? Did we assess this? Did we go over that? And so that meditation really like drove home for me, like, you need to be in your body. You need to let your body lead, because your body is more wise than this. And I was just like, Lord. And so now talking to you now about it is like, this makes, and, you know, contextualizing it in science, it's like, oh, okay. So what I knew or kind of grabbed intuitively is like, no, there's a whole field that studied this. It's amazing.
It's very fascinating. So when we think about body wisdom and anchoring in our body and what that means, you know, it's really powerful. It's really, really powerful that we are, you know, and I'll keep on going back to the movie with the bad subtitles or the incorrect subtitles. That's what dieting, that's what the wellness industry, that's what capitalism, that's what racism, that's what all the isms have done, is that they've distorted those messages of us understanding and connecting with ourselves and the world. And, you know, as we spoke about in other episodes, it's like, I would love to be able to shake things up. I also I have limits. And so helping individuals. So, you know, I know I'm changing the world. I know that, and I'm doing it. You know, my revolution is one person at a time. And I'm okay with that.
You know, it's interesting as you're talking, and I'm asking myself, when I think about eating disorders, or you know, who do I think of? What do I think of? And I think of someone who's under eating, they're Anglo, female, and I kind of think, from what you're saying and from, you know, the kind of exploration, is that we all have a body. So it's not necessarily about gender. It's, you know, that men and, you know, trans and, you know, that whole thing is there. But I never think about Black women. And I'm trying to, in my head, go, well, if I think about the Black community and my experience in the Black community, it's not something that we talk about.
No,
we don't talk about that kind of body disconnection, and when your body's not feeling safe, because there are so many things out there that are unsafe. There are so many things that you have to deal with and process, that the last thing that you're thinking about is that a water cue or a food cue? You know, and also, you know, you talked about trauma, big T, small t trauma. And I wonder, you know, how that maybe adds, and everyone's story is different, as you've said, but how that adds to the complexity, because some communities are missing from getting the assistance and the help. Because my thought is, you know, someone with anorexia nervosa or bulimia or something, and my image is not a Black woman or an Indian woman or a Turkish woman or a, you know, other communities. And I'm like, actually, I need to rethink that. I need to rethink that. And if in the Black community we start having conversations, and actually it's not just about Black women, what about Black men? And I'm sitting here going, if we're not having these conversations,
All right, let me blow your mind a little bit. Ready?
Oh, I'm excited. Ready.
When we think of eating disorders on the template of a body shape and size, we're missing the point. You could be sitting with someone in the Black community who has a restrictive anorexic nervosa style of eating disorder or patterns of eating, and they might be in a larger body. Because the way their body reacts to starvation will be different to somebody who is in a different body. So,
oh God, Anna, the signposts that we're given about one plus 5 equals 1,279, when actually the signposts are so inaccurate.
And so, yes, so there is a lot of research and a lot of media and a lot of publicity around anorexia nervosa being a young Anglo-Saxon female of being malnourished and underweight and essentially emaciated looking like. That's about like 1% of the presenting problem.
Wow.
Right. So if we look at the entirety of eating disorder, that presentation is like a little sliver.
Right. Okay.
We see an eating disorder has many facets. So restriction isn't always the only one. There are many types of disordered eating behaviors and patterns. Which again, it's not the scope of this podcast, but happy to provide more information at another time or direct people to the different types of eating disorders. But they come in all shapes and sizes and colors. It discriminates no one. I mean, yay, equal opportunity. You can have a messed up relationship with food and eating and movement, no matter what color, size, shape, gender, sexual orientation you are. So, if we look at what happens in trans communities, that dysphoria, that being of, one gender and then your body not representing that, there's a lot of things, a lot of disordered patterns of behavior that you might engage with that are harmful, so that there is more peace in that relationship. And that's not always, not easy to talk about. Men are becoming much more open about presenting. Can you imagine if everybody had to look like, what's his name, Chris Hemsworth? Like, oh. I don't even know if Chris Hemsworth can look like Chris Hemsworth. Right.
Without a lot of assistance.
With a lot of assistance.
Too much assistance.
And also, this idea that most magazines and publicities are now photoshopping. So even the actors themselves, who are already in, what's the word? Idealized bodies or, kind of aspiring figures. Even then, they're photoshopped a little bit to like look tanner, look whiter, look bigger, look. So we're creating this distortion around what bodies should look like, and then we're not talking about them. When we think about, and I've done a bit of reading about eating disorders in Black communities, and again, the severing of culture. Right? So if we think about when we think the foods of our people or the foods of our culture, and you come into an Anglo-Saxon world and they say, hey, actually, and again, I say this from a Colombian perspective, don't eat plantains because plantains are carbohydrates. And I was like, well, I love my plantains.
I love plantains. I do a lot for plantains. tell you, anyone that knows me knows if there's plantain, I'm there.
Right.
Like, hello.
And so as we start in our relationship with our body starts to sever the relationships we have with culture, because one of the ways or markers of culture that we have is through food.
Yes, absolutely.
And so we start losing those connections, and we start, so it can be quite traumatic in and of itself. And it can happen across the weight spectrum, so people can be consuming large amounts of food in ways that are unhelpful and what we would determine a binge. So the definition of a binge is to consume a large amount of food that seems absurd or so large that the human body wouldn't be able to consume it in a single sitting. And so,
is that what binge means?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
No.
So we use the word binge when we refer to quote unquote overeating. Overeating what? If I'm hungry, I'm just going to eat. Overeating determines that there must be a set point of eating, and then I'm eating over it. But if hunger fluctuates, then what am I overeating? Anyway, so it gets, we start breaking down these concepts. And it, people can binge and be in smaller bodies.
Yeah.
That doesn't, and the health risks that for a person who binge, they have a risk of physical tears down the esophagus. They have, passing out. They have cardiac issues, aneurysms. Like there's a lot of damage that can go connected with disordered eating behaviors. There's medical risks that are associated with hurting your body this way and harming your body this way.
This conversation is just so mind-blowing.
My mind is blown.
Yeah, and I'm super fascinated.
Told you.
You did it.
Buckle up, buckle in.
But I'm super fascinated to know about sort of how these things, sort of eating disorders specifically, present in sort of in the Black culture, just because I know from experience with, say, like anxiety and depression and things like that, I learned that it presents very differently for me than what a textbook says it presents as, right? And I learned that, like, oh, it can be anger. It could be irritability. It could be frustration. Like, and that really shocked me because, in my household growing up, one, we didn't really talk about feelings. And two, you weren't allowed to be depressed, right? You weren't allowed to be like, what? We don't get depressed. That's not exactly.
That's a white people problem. Sorry.
Exactly. I didn't want to say it, but I'm happy you did.
I can say it. I don't mind.
You can say it. Yeah. But yeah. And so now my brain is clicking over and I'm like, does it present differently for us in terms of eating as well?
I would say yes. So when we think about, communities, all types of communities, it will present differently from the quote unquote textbook. Again, the textbooks were written with very, very specific populations in mind.
Yep.
And even the textbooks get it wrong, right? So I don't think I've ever had a single presentation of somebody in an eating disorder being a white Anglo-Saxon young female present in the same way each and every time.
Right.
So,
okay.
So that in of itself is also different. When we look at the American culture and how eating disorders present in the Black community within the US, and we look at an Australian narrative and how the eating disorders affect or are in communities of color here, they're all different.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So when this is why it's an individual, and it's why it's so secretive, because people don't have language for this.
Yeah.
People don't know how to talk about suffering and harm and the trauma and the disconnection. And that's why, because we don't know, we've never talked about it.
Yeah.
And so it is important that when you start to observe your relationship with your food and your body, that we look for your voice, not my voice, not textbook's voice, but your voice. And what does that mean? And how will that, I've been trying to avoid using the word, but how does that journey look like
Mm.
for each individual?
Yeah.
And I think one of the good things that we've been seeing emerge in the eating disorder community is hearing more minority voices. So hearing more men, hearing more trans, hearing women of older age. So, you know, postmenopausal women or femme identifying, entering in these changes in their bodies and that developing eating disorders as a first presentation. And we're seeing much more nuances in, communities of color. So, you know, Black, Indigenous, Latin American. And so we're getting more information. But we're so new. We're so new at this.
Yeah. It's great work.
Because I think I might have had this conversation with you, Anna, previously, and we talked a little bit about, you know, the Black community and, you know, in Australia, where are the practitioners even that, you know, we've had, you know, we've talked about, you know, finding therapists that just represent who you are. So for that specific field of eating disorders, and, you know, like, where would you even find someone who not just understands the layers of, you know, what you've talked about, or, you know, embodiment, love, compassion, seeing all the cues, but also that structural thing around racism. It's like, where are they?
Well, and how do you and how do you advertise it? So you did. We spoke about this a couple of months ago, and I'm still looking. I don't know, and haven't met, and I haven't found. And again, I put this out to the community. If anybody knows a therapist who works in the eating disorder field, who is a person of color, please reach out. Because it's not easily identifiable. I found a woman from the Indian diaspora who does some of the work, but it's not like we put it on our profiles. It's not like, you know, the best I can do is to tell you that I speak Spanish and that I'm happy to do therapy in Spanish, but no one would know that I know all these things.
Really?
Yeah. Because you just tick a box in your little profile and says you do eating disorders and you do a bit of trauma work and you do depression and anxiety, because everybody does depression and anxiety. But they wouldn't understand that I think now when identify as in the eating disorder field as somebody who works from a weight inclusive, health at every size perspective, that's a bit of a little signal saying, I understand the systemic oppressive nature and history that you're coming in when you say, I have a problem with my food. With my body.
Say if someone is, you know, listening to this or watching this now, and they're like, you know what, this is really resonating. This is really hitting me. And actually, where would someone go? What would be the process if someone wanted to talk about, actually, I think I've got a lifelong history or first presentation of, you know, a relationship with my body, which I don't want to continue, doesn't make me feel good. I think I'm actually really harming myself. And I just can't find a way out by myself. I need help. What would be the process? Where would you direct somebody to?
So in the first instance, I would direct people internally. So, you know, when this stuff comes up for you, if anything we've discussed today in the podcast is really resonating and it may be comfortable or uncomfortable, just take a few moments, breathe through that, really allow yourself a space and compassion and room to think, right? We don't need to be reactive. We just need to be aware. So that's the first point of call. Come inside, come here, come into the heart space. The next point of call is go to your GP or your general practitioner or medical facility and start to have the conversation with that so that they can start to help you connect with practitioners, to have a check of your body. So again, let's start with really basics. How's your heart doing? How's your blood work doing? You might be curious to engage with nutritional support to see how, and again, I would recommend somebody who identifies or uses the label of non-diet or health at every size. That if they use those labels, they're more likely to be actually they're going to be informed about some of the issues that we've talked about today, and will not be recommending weight loss as a intervention.
Right.
They will be helping you address health behaviors, and then from there, so once you've done sort of that kind of first level care, I would encourage people to start to go online and connect here in Australia, here in Victoria, with Eating Disorders Victoria. They have wonderful web pages with support services, chats that you can help, and they can help link you in with therapists. Each state has their own eating disorder group. So Eating Disorder New South Wales and Queensland. If you're overseas, each country will have some resources around eating disorders. So I would recommend, there's a plethora of information about eating disorder recovery, anti-diet information. So one of my favorite podcasts and book writers and clinicians is called Christy Harrison. She wrote a book called The Anti-Diet, something. Really great stuff. I'm happy to provide a list of resources so that you can connect. And also start looking for a therapist. And looking for a therapist is hard because, one, you think you want something and you don't know if that's going to feel right or be right. But being really open and going and seeking professional psychological help is important. It is the space where one can do this reflective work. I would, and again, reconnect with just curiosity and compassion. I think that would be a guide, a way of connecting yourself to services. And of course, if anything we've discussed is quite triggering, or you feel unsafe within yourself, please use the Lifeline Hotlines. That's very important that you can have access to them. I will hand you that number in 2 seconds because it's irresponsible not to. So yeah, it's 13 11 14 for anybody here in Australia. Or seek go to the GP and help create change.
That's fabulous, because like we said, we all have a body, and we're not immune to the societies and the communities that we live in, so we're all impacted.
All impacted. And when we think, I guess the other thing is that I would encourage people is to start to really challenge that notion of weight being an indicator of health. Look at your behaviors of health that are supporting you, and challenge, why are you I don't know. One of my patients said that they wanted to run a marathon, and I questioned why. How is that serving you? And we were able to identify that was part of their identity, to be an athlete. And that's okay, cool. But if the intention is because it helps me lose weight, well, then that's not a noble intention. That's actually doing harm rather than seeking help. And so the same behavior might, depending on the intention, might be a harmful behavior or a help-seeking behavior.
I think it's really important to, one of the points that you made before we go was being curious, because that's kind of how I approached my process and how I go about sort of unpacking all of the things. It's, you just literally become curious. Why did I do that? Why did I think that? Where did that voice come from? Sort of thing. And I think that will really help people if they're not already doing that, you know, that'll really help people sort of facilitate the process of getting the help that they need. Yeah. That was a huge one for me anyway, just being curious.
Just being curious. And as I said in the last episode, be courageous. Be brave. You know, it takes courage to dismantle systemic oppression, no matter where that looks like, whether you're doing that from, and you can't do one without the other. So if you're dismantling body oppression, you're contributing to dismantling racism, you're contributing to dismantle economic oppression, cultural oppression, religious oppression, sexual orientation and identity. So it doesn't matter where you're doing your work, start with you, start within, with your body.
Absolutely.
And go courageously and bravely. And, you know, I'm here and I will support you, and I will, you know, continue to bring joy and to cheer for the progress.
Oh, amazing.
Beautiful.
Amazing. This has been mind-blowing, amazing. Anna, tell us again where people can find you.
So I'm not very active on social media. I do have a Instagram page called Mindful Anna X. But mainly you can find me in my office at Mind Body Well.
Fair enough.
Fabulous.
And so,
Fabulous.
Great.
That is absolutely amazing. And just really want to thank you for just pouring out all of your wisdom, your insights, but also you come with a really deep sense of kindness. And that's certainly something that as the, you know, the Love Vibe podcast, this is where we want, you know, people to feel, and it's very tangible, your sense of deep kindness and what you do and what you've committed yourself to do. And as you said, it's a revolution of one person at a time. And we thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you for having me. My favorite takeaway is that this wasn't stubbornness, this was my destiny, and I'm really glad to embody that.